Right, Fortnite has just changed all of the weapons to be projectile weapons rather than hit scan, which essentially means when you fire a shot, it doesn't immediately register. The bullet has some time to travel, like snipers. If you haven't played yet, quick explanation. Now, I saw a tweet from Queasy on Twitter. Obviously, classic complaint, it is Queasy. But, you know, some people agree, some people don't agree. And his tweet basically said, bullet drop might be the worst thing for competitive. Now, I think this is quite, I was going to say an interesting take, but it's not, because there's not really that much backstory to what he actually said. But I've really wanted to kind of weigh in on my thoughts on the topic regardless since the start of the season. So, the start of Fortnite, if you think about the way that the weapons ended up being, say the regular assault rifle, Scar, there was so much bloom, and that's always been the mechanic that Fortnite has essentially run with all of the assault rifles, which has a lot of randomness and really isn't that skillful. Essentially, if you wanted to have high accuracy on your ARs, you needed to just either like single tap fire or be really in close range. So from long range, it was already kind of difficult to hit long range shots anyway. And then of course that changed when it came to chapter 3. I think it was the first time we had a first person assault rifle. I can't quite remember, outside of like the scoped ARs and things like that. You know, when a lot of the primary assault rifles, and in particular in chapter 4, I think it was every single season, ended up having a first person one, which ended up being unbelievably overpowered. There was the Red Eye, the MK7, or the other MK, whatever it was called. And of course, basically every single season, we've had these really strong assault rifles. And if you look at like the weapons, they've really tried to do it all. The MK7 was like lower damage per shot, but the high fire rate. So you'd think it would be difficult to have like a high amount of accuracy. All the way up to the kind of Red Eye assault rifle, which ended up having really high damage per shot and a really low kind of fire rate. So you've had like every end of the spectrum with first-person weapons, and the result was that nearly all of them were incredibly overpowered or very, very strong. Now, yes, you could lower the damage per shot to try and nerf it, but I do actually think there's basically two other alternative solutions they can use. One of them is the bullet drop-off, like we've seen already, and the other one is recoil patterns, kind of similar to Counter-Strike. So if you've never played Counter-Strike, for example, your gun will always fire, whichever weapon it will be, in a very specific recoil pattern, so you have to learn to kind of control that with your mouse or with your controller. But that is one of the big problems with recoil patterns in this game in particular, is that of course Fortnite has a ton of controller players, and recoil patterns would be particularly difficult to combine with aim assist. So the other alternative, of course, is they've gone on to choose for this chapter and are testing out seems to be the bullet drop off on every single weapon. Now, I think this is interesting because when we were just mentioning a controller for a second there, I think I haven't asked any controller players. If you are one, let me know in the comments. How is aiming with bullet drop-off on controller at long ranges? Because I imagine it is awful. You know, aim assist is a big part of controller Fortnite. All the lobbies are mixed. You have controller players playing with keyboard and mouse players. And I imagine trying to get storm surge damage with no aim assist at this kind of ranges would be incredibly difficult. So I think already we have one big negative of having the bullet drop off. However, with a lot of these ranges anyway, I'm pretty sure there wouldn't have been aim assist already if your kind of crosshair was on the player already. I think we have a bit of a negative here already for bullet drop off, which is just controller players kind of heavily nerfed. I'm sure if you're a keyboard mouse player, you're already happy about hearing that though. Now, some of the kind of just gameplay trends that I've noticed from this seems to be, firstly, of course, it is nerfing ranged damage significantly. So if you're further away from your opponent, like over 100 meters, 150 plus, it's really difficult to hit shots onto players, which means that if you're launch padding or you're using a rift, you're now way safer than you really ever have been. And I think I'm trying to think to all of the games I've played so far. I played Geocache Cup, I played 2 tournaments so far, and I haven't died out the sky once. I actually don't even think I've lost my entire shield whilst rifting or launch padding once yet this season. So mobility is a lot stronger, which, given there's not much in the season, I'm okay with. I think that's actually a pretty good change. The next one is also like running away from fights is also easier. Like if you manage to actually get the distance between you and your opponent, and they have either, if you both have grapple blades, like you can get away relatively easy if you manage just to run and hoof it, which again, is that good? Is that bad? One thing I'm really interested in seeing is how Storm Surge is going to play out. Most of the tournaments, I mean, the Geocache Cup final wasn't really stacked with Storm Surge either, but coming to FNCS later on in the season, this will be a big problem. It's like, how will Surge do? Because usually if people are boxing up high into bases and trying to go for tags, from long range, they're going to rack up significantly less damage now than the players who try to fight for their Storm Surge. So essentially what this means is in really stacked lobbies, the players who are fighting off spawn or who are just pushing other players to go for eliminations mid-game are going to be much better off with their Storm Surge. Now, this is assuming that snipers either are, well, they are in competitive currently, but are nerfed to an extent, because obviously if you're up on a high base and you can just fire out headshot snipe after headshot snipe, you'll probably be fine on your Storm Surge damage. But right now, it seems like, you know, if you're kind of one of the teams who keeps your distance from other players in a stacked lobby to try and rack up your surge, you are going to be significantly lower. I think of guys like Kemi and Seti, for example. Those guys may struggle with surge if they don't end up sniping someone or end up going close and having to try and get a fight. So basically a lot of the strategies will now be trying to get close to teams, kind of 3-2-1ing with the assault rifles and picking up either big damage or just actually fighting a team. And of course, like, the damage and the damage per second that these weapons are putting out this season is actually insane. So it's kind of good that they're nerfed at long range, because it would be impossible to rotate anywhere. Now, there's a couple interesting trends I've seen with this. The first one is obviously, will this nerf cheaters and cheating? Like, I'm sure cheaters can probably still headshot snipe. I actually don't know how this will work. But with these kind of guns, unless you're closer or like into close range, it's probably surely a little bit more difficult. But I say that, like, cheaters those used to use the DMR to cheat, and I'm pretty sure that had bullet drop off as well. So maybe not. I don't know. But one thing that I've continued to see is that bullet trading is happening a lot more. So it's when both players eliminate each other at the same time. My first game, I ended up dying at the same time as the other player I was fighting, which is pretty funny because obviously the bullets are taking longer to travel. Bloom, as I mentioned at the start of this video, is not a skillful mechanic in any form of shooter game. I remember playing Halo Reach all the way back in 2000, many years ago, 2008 or whenever the hell it came out, and everyone complained so hard about the bloom mechanic in that game all the way back then. And then as soon as Fortnite's been out, it's always had this reputation of being an extremely unskilled game when it comes to the actual like fighting mechanics. Of course, building, editing, and the actual gameplay, yes, absolutely, but it's always had this stigma of being an unskilled shooter because the gun mechanics were so poor. Yeah, but the bullet drop-off removes kind of all of that randomness that Bloom added to the game, and instead gives a much higher skill gap weapon to use. Obviously, the video, the title of this is it a good thing or a bad thing? Something along those lines. Having projectile weapons in Fortnite. For like a season, I'm happy to test it out and to see how it feels. Just from playing myself, and also from obviously watching streams and watching about tournament VODs and seeing what people are saying about this, it seems like the players who have insane aim still have absolutely insane aim. They just may not be able to hit that many shots at that further distance. It is now a bigger skill gap in aiming, in my personal opinion. But I think throughout the entire season, and in particular through FNCS, we'll have to see if it ends up being better or worse than having bloom weapons in the game. I do think it'll be better, but maybe some people right now are just kind of frustrated because it feels different. But who knows? We'll find out. Let me know what you think down below. Catch you guys later. Peace.